Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Amplifying Authenticity. My name is Megan Fucciarelli. I'm so glad you're with us. Today's guest is Jim Grace, the founder of Modern Financial Wellness. Jim's work challenges the idea that success is about optimization, status, or doing what looks good on paper. Instead, he believes authenticity is built through a series of quiet, often uncomfortable choices that prioritize alignment over appearance. Throughout his career, Jim repeatedly chose work that felt meaningful, even when it was slower, riskier, or less financially optimized. And those decisions have shaped how he defines success today and how he helps clients build lives that actually fit. In this conversation, we explore what it means to listen to misalignment, redefine what enough actually is, and design work and money systems that support human well being. Jim, I'm so glad you're here. Welcome to Amplifying Authenticity.
I'm so glad to be here, Megan. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I want to jump right into something that I've heard you talk about before. And to me, it's something that just feels really relatable. And it's the idea that a career can look successful on paper, but still feel misaligned. And I'm wondering if you could talk about that a little bit because I can relate.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can. I see it all the time in the work that I do with clients. I see it, I've lived it, I think, myself at times throughout my career, leading up to the point that I'm at right now, having just launched my own firm. My wife is going through a career transition right now and has wrestled a lot with some of that concept. So I think it's really prevalent everywhere. I think it's something, like you said, that's really relatable. Um, as I think about that, I heard some statistics recently. I just got a new book. I haven't finished it yet, but it's called Designing Your Life.
Mm,
And it's by these two Stanford professors that were mechanical engineers, product designers. One of them worked for Apple, and now they've kind of transitioned into this design approach to creating a meaningful, fulfilling life. And again, I haven't finished it, but in the very beginning, there were two statistics that I thought were striking. And the first was something like 75% of college graduates are currently working in a field or career that has nothing to do with their major. And
mhm.
two-thirds of people in the working world are not feeling fulfilled or happy in their career. So that's just like to that point of how relatable it actually is. I think there are a lot of us who are finding themselves sitting in a situation that they don't feel real happy, fulfilled, aligned, use whatever term that you
Right.
want. They're just not in the right spot. Um so I think it again, it's really, really prevalent and very, very common. And
Mhm.
hopefully that's helpful for people to hear that you're not alone if you're sitting there thinking like, what am I doing here? I hate this. I should be doing something else.
Yeah.
Um, again, it's really prevalent and really relatable. And I just think that, what I see in my work most often, and as a financial planner, I'm working with people on their financial lives. Um, and I think a lot of them don't have a good sense of what's truly important and meaningful to them individually, and they feel stuck or tied to a paycheck or a career path or some status and identity that is assigned to them by their profession. It comes in a lot of different shapes and sizes. Um, but I think it's totally common to find yourself in a position that doesn't necessarily align with who you truly are, what you think your or say your values are, um, and what's most important and truly meaningful in your life. And I think today more than ever, we kind of compare ourselves on social media or to our neighbors. The term keeping up with the Joneses, that
Right.
back in the day, that meant like your actual neighbor. Your
Mhm.
physical universe was really small. And now it's, we're comparing ourselves to influencers across the world. Um, so I Yeah, I feel like I'm rambling and I'm going all over the place a little bit on you, but I just it's totally normal and totally common for people to find themselves in this situation where they maybe feel stuck in
Right.
a place that they shouldn't be.
Yeah.
So
And I wanna touch on that because I think, you brought up so many points, and the one that I'm hearing right now most prevalent in my brain is sometimes we are in the right profession, but not in the right organization or not in the right company, or we have that desire, that drive to do what we're doing, but maybe it's just not the right fit in the organization. Do you
yeah,
see that as
yeah.
well?
Yeah, definitely. It could be kind of a cultural fit. It could be the work has just evolved away from what you're truly passionate about. And this is what happened to my wife recently. She just left a corporate job after being there for about 11 years.
Mm,
And it started when she joined, it was a small little scrappy startup, and now it's a publicly traded company.
wow.
And for the last couple of years, I think the feeling that she had, this sense kind of started to creep in, like where she started to realize she wasn't doing the work that she had originally joined the company to do.
Mhm.
Where the business and the corporate culture just evolved, where she wasn't aligned to the same mission anymore, right?
Right.
And it was really hard. It took the better part of 2 years to start thinking about an exit. And I think a lot of the things that she struggled with in leaving were related to, I need a job, right? I was thinking about launching my own business. We have two little kids, we have a mortgage, we like to take vacations, right? It's like, how are we going to continue to live the lifestyle that we want? If she were to acknowledge and have the courage to kind of leave that place that wasn't a good fit because things had just changed.
Right.
Um, and I think how we got through that was to take a step back and try to refocus on what's truly most important to us and most meaningful to us. Because I think when you find yourself in this situation where maybe you're passionate about the work, but it's not the right company, or again, there's all these different iterations of that can come up. But I think it gets really scary for people to make change. And we found that the best place for us to start thinking about making that change was to think about what's most important to us, which is, we love our community, we love our home, right? So, we need to make enough money to pay the mortgage, right? Which I
Right.
can do myself. We like spending time with our kids, right? And, do we need to, if she takes some extended time off, do we maybe need to think about taking different types of vacations? Well, maybe, but that we can still focus on what's truly important to us, which is spending time with our kids and even traveling. It
Yeah.
might just look a little bit different. And when you get into that conversation or that self reflection about what is most meaningful and important, typically, I think if you spend enough time there, you realize that the truly meaningful and important things have less to do with your income or the identity associated with the work that you were doing or who you were doing it for.
Mhm.
And you can kind of find other places to be that are more fulfilling and more aligned when you focus on making sure that the really important things are kind of taken care of. And that, in our situation, I had to do a lot of work myself. So as a financial planner, if we're talking about this like financial transition, obviously it's my role to figure out like what do we need from a financial standpoint. And I have a lot of historical scarcity mindset that I inherited from my parents, and how I came up over the years. And so for her to feel comfortable leaving that position, I needed to be comfortable. I needed to truly align,
Right.
um, where I was. And if I said, like, look, all the really important things are going to be good, even though we're going to make less income during this transition if she takes some time off, I need to kind of live that, right? I need to not just say it and pay it lip service. And I think when I finally did that work to just not tell her like, "Hey, we're gonna be okay," and all of the really important things are good, um, but I needed to kind of believe that. And when I
Yeah.
did and really kind of committed to that and aligned what was saying was important to me, and why we needed to make this transition for her, that's where she felt safe to do it. Right. And
Yeah.
again, it took a couple of years for us to get to that point. And it can be really, really challenging, but I think it was definitely the right decision,
Mhm.
and it was a worthwhile exercise for us as a couple and as a family,
Yeah.
to kind of go through that. So yeah, that's our experience in terms of like wrong work, wrong place.
Right.
And again, I think it comes up in a lot of different ways and shapes and forms, but
Right.
when you're kind of struggling with those things, I think a good place to start is like what's really important, what matters here,
Yeah.
and everything else kind of falls into place.
Yeah, and kind of going into that, what's really important. So I had a little bit of a different situation, but I was in Chicago. I was a superintendent. I was living what I thought I was supposed to be living, right? I had a good title. I was making decent money. I was a single parent, but I was able to provide for my son and I very easily. And I had historical money mindset issues too, scarcity
Yeah.
mindset. We'll talk about that too and after this piece. But I remember thinking, "Okay, this is great. I'm exactly where I need to be." And I loved what I did. And then
Mm-hmm.
I got a call from my parents, and they were in Michigan, about 6 hours from me in Chicago, and they said, "Megan, we really need some help. We're going through some medical stuff."
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking, "Okay, well, it's hard for me to help 6 hours away, single parent. How am I gonna do this?" And I just had gotten maybe a week before that, I had gotten a letter in the mail from the Illinois retirement system for teachers, TRS, teacher retirement system, saying that I had enough years vested to retire. So I said, "Huh, okay." And I took the leap and I said, "Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and cash out. I'm gonna retire. I'm gonna move back to Michigan." I moved back to Michigan to be closer to my parents because I did that work of what's really important. And
Mm-hmm.
at the time, my son was 5, and I said he was 4 when I made the decision, he was 5 when we moved back. But I said, "Okay, he can start his schooling there, we can be close to grandparents, we can be close to family, that's what's most important to me."
Mm-hmm.
And I made that decision, but I had to leave the title behind.
Mm.
And when I came back, I could have came back and gotten another superintendent position. I actually did do an interim position because I thought that's what I needed to do. But what I realized in all of that was I needed to take time to be with family because that's why I came back in the first place.
Yeah.
And that's what started us Squared as a full-time venture was I'm gonna do this work. I thought I was gonna own my job, right? I had no intention of owning a company. I thought I was gonna own my job. I was gonna take a couple contracts here and there, make ends meet. I was gonna be fine. It's
Mm-hmm.
grown into something so much bigger than I thought it would be. And I'm fully aligned to my values and my
Mm-hmm.
passion. But it
Mm-hmm.
came down to what's most important. And similar to you and your family, it was family,
Yeah. And
right?
I don't think it's surprising that you're successful with your venture and growing your business. Because I think, and I see this a lot, when you are aligned with, if you want to call them values or what's most important or what your purpose and passions are, everything else takes care of itself, right? So
Yeah.
prioritizing your family maybe felt like a leap. And it sounds like you had this identity thing where I still need to get that role again because that's who I am.
Right.
Within all of that, when you prioritize what most important, your contracts and piecing it together turns into like a thriving business, right? I
Right.
don't think that's a coincidence, and I see that a lot, and I feel that way. With my business, it was a struggle to get here,
Mhm.
and to launch my own firm. And the way that we financial plan is a little bit different than industry standard. And some of the resources we bring into the process are a little unique. Um, and I would definitely have more money and a bigger title and fancier cars and those types of things if I had did done it differently. But I don't think I'd be as happy and fulfilled and aligned as I am today.
Right.
There's no chance, right? So um, yeah, I think there's a lot there to success coming from that prioritization and being true to yourself and knowing that you're good. and that you can piece it together creates this opportunity where success kind of breeds from that over time. So
Right.
that's cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's the idea that we can define success for ourselves.
Hmm.
And as a society, there's an interpretation of what success is, right? We see people with nice cars and fancy houses, and we're like, ooh, they're really successful, right? Or as a society, we say, oh, they have so many followers on social media, they're successful. But it's up to each and every one of us to truly define what success means to us. For
Hmm.
me, if my son goes out there and does amazing things, I was super successful. Like, I get emotional thinking about my son because everything I do, and I'm sure you can relate with your children,
Same. Yeah.
everything I do is for him, not in a martyr-like sacrificial way, but
Hmm.
I genuinely live the life I live, and I try to make sure I love every minute of my life so that I can model for my son that that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
Is to love
Yeah.
what you do because we spend a lot of time working, right?
We spend a
And
ton of time working.
right.
Yeah. And I kind of laughed when you said, the house and the cars and on paper successful. And would just jump in and because of my professional work, I see behind the curtain a lot. And I
Yeah.
know a lot of people, I know their financial situation intimately, where by any measure, outside measure, you think these folks were very successful and they're very unhappy. And they deal with the same type of issues that we all do. um, and again, I think back to that statistic that 60 some odd percent of us are working in jobs where we don't feel happy or fulfilled.
Right.
That's not good, right?
No.
That's not good, and it's not worth it. Whatever financial reward or status that you feel like comes along with sitting in a position where you're not happy for 8 to 10 to 12 hours a day, like it's just not worth it. And there's all kinds of research now, and continues to be more that comes to the forefront about money buying happiness, right? And you probably
Mhm.
heard some of those statistics or studies in the past. There's some nuance there. Money does buy happiness if you don't have any money, right? So if you can't meet your needs, then money brings a ton of happiness. But at a
Mhm.
certain point for all of us, there's going to be a diminishing return in the amount of money that we have. And
Mhm.
you find that past that point, it's connections with the people that matter most in our lives, being able to make a contribution. So having a trade or a passion or a hobby, whatever, if you can go out into the world and make a contribution, that brings a lot of fulfillment and satisfaction. Um, it's these other things in our lives that
Right.
make us happy and fulfilled. Um, Again, once our needs are met, right? And once
Right.
we're, safe and secure, able to take a vacation every once in a while. Um, yeah, so it's
Yeah.
there's so many different rabbit holes I could go down with the
Right.
kind of money doesn't buy happiness or the social comparison. It's prevalent, but I love your story. I've lived it myself and I see it a lot with the clients that I work with. The people that are most happy are doing things that they love and making a contribution in the world and have significant, meaningful connections with their family, their friends, their community. And
Mhm.
all of that can look different for everybody else. But the people that are truly, that I look at and admire and seem to be really fulfilled and happy, a lot of them don't have the level of wealth as some other folks that are really miserable and having a really tough time.
Right.
So yeah.
And I love that you brought up the idea of money doesn't buy happiness as long as your needs are met. Because in the work I do, right, I work a lot with underrepresented groups and systemic issues, whether it's systemic classism, systemic racism, and how there is such an unequitable and inequitable playing field for many groups in the US and globally. And
100%.
it's as long as our needs are met, money doesn't buy
Mhm,
happiness, right?
mhm,
And that's
mhm,
such a strong comparison, and I want to kind of weave into because one of the reasons why I sought you out to say, "Jim, I need you as a guest on our show," is Our whole focus is amplifying authenticity, not just in the person who we're interviewing, but I want to interview people who are amplifying authenticity and in others, in those they serve, in helping them reach what they want to accomplish. And as a financial advisor, you're doing that. You're working with your clients in a very unique way. And that's what I was so drawn to because I have a financial advisor. I love her. She is great. She works with my son, who's only 15. She
That's
works with
awesome.
me. We've seen great returns, and she knows me as a person.
Mm,
And that personal connection is so critical. And then I met with you, and I was like, wow, you're doing some really cool things too. Can you share with our audience what makes your style of advising people around money, because we're gonna talk about money mindset too in a minute. But what
mhm.
makes your approach different from other financial advisors?
Yeah, thank you for that. I think from a technical standpoint, most people, when they think about hiring a financial advisor, most people get financial advice through their investments. So I think it's 80 to 90% of the industry is still what's called assets under management based. So if you are a single mom and trying to figure out college planning in your own retirement with aging parents who have medical concerns, like all of that's going to impact your money and your financial situation. And if you seek out a financial advisor, most financial advisors require some kind of upfront investment. And a lot of those firms have minimums. So if you don't have a $500,000 or $1 million, you can't even get in the door because of the way that the industry is set up. And that doesn't make those advisors bad people or bad advisors. That's just the industry standard. So I've thought a lot about how we wanted to operate in the future and what we wanted our practice to look like. So what we did was create a fixed fee ongoing financial planning model. And we didn't make invent that. It's not unique, but it's still a small percentage of the industry operates this way, where rather than saying, how much money do you have in the first conversation to decide whether or not we can work together? We want to truly understand the situation that our clients are in and what it is they're trying to accomplish. And then we created a process to not just manage their investments, but we get together regularly upfront during the onboarding process. It's usually every 3 to 4 weeks. We're getting together with folks and we're building out what their current baseline financial plan looks like. So we're
Mm,
studying where they are today. And that's a really important step in on all of this conversation is awareness of where we are and acceptance of where we are today, right? So that's step one with us, and that takes a couple of meetings to build out. Then we spend a lot of time talking about what's important and not just I want to send my son to college or I want to retire someday. It's why are those things important to you? So I want my son to go to college because I never had that opportunity. I'm making this up, right? Could
mhm,
be whatever. And I want to fully fund that because my whole goal is life is to invest and give him the opportunities that I didn't have, right?
mhm,
So it's not just like I want to send my kid to school, like what's the why behind the things that we're doing? So
mhm,
we want to spend a lot of time flushing out those conversations and those goals. Goals based planning was a thing in our industry. It still is to a certain extent. It was this concept like, well, tell me what you want to do and I'll tell you the steps to get there. So I want to
mhm,
retire, which means I have to put this much into my 401k every month for this long. But there's layers deeper beyond just identifying those attainable financial goals.
mhm,
It's what's important to us. What do our values look like? And so after we establish what a client's baseline plan looks like, we get into those conversations about what's truly important and meaningful. And that's when we transition into making recommendations in their plan that align those two things. So it's like,
mhm,
these are the resources, this is my reality, and these are the things that are truly meaningful to me. And that's where there's opportunity to kind of get into these discussions of um, you don't have to make $250,000 to accomplish your goals and live the life that you said was going to be most meaningful and aligned with your values. And
right,
that's where some of these light bulbs go off for folks during the planning process.
mhm,
And that's why all these steps are important. So we understand where you're at, we understand what's really important to you, then we make these recommendations. That process can take a couple of months to work through and getting together regularly, and we charge a monthly fee for that. And I
Okay.
think that process is what makes us unique. And then in addition, I've also partnered with some outside resources. So I have a financial therapist, Ashley Kwame. She's a former licensed marriage and family counselor, and she gave up that practice to support independent financial planning firms on the more behavioral, financial psychology, financial behavior, kind of financial therapy related aspects of the work. Because what we find is we can create this beautiful plan. Um, that takes into account your reality and your current financial situation. We can have these conversations of what your goals are and what you say is important, and we can make these recommendations. But sometimes that's not enough, right? As human beings, we're all going to have different values, mindsets, attitudes, beliefs about money. And if we don't explore those, understand them, and try to support working on some of those things, then the best plan in the world isn't going to get and remain implemented, right? Because
Right.
we're human beings. So I mentioned my scarcity mindset comes from how I grew up and how my parents were. Um, and that gets in the way of me,
Mhm.
even as a financial planner who's very aware of all these things, that gets in the way and in the middle of conversations that I have with my wife about money. And that ties
Absolutely.
to her decision to leave her work, right? I had to work on that so that I could align to my values and the practice what I'm preaching, so to speak, so that she could feel safe to transition away from her job, right? And it took 2 years.
Right.
So this is a long explanation trying to tie all these things together, but we want to do work on behalf of our clients that
Mm.
meets them where they are and can help them make meaningful change in their life,
Yeah.
not just manage their money, which is something we do and is a very important part of financial planning.
Right.
It's just a small piece. And we've, again, and when I getting to this point and doing the work that we do in the way that I do it is a very long culmination of a very long, winding journey of being curious and making mistakes and sitting in bad spots for too long. I've been a financial planner for 15 or 16 years. And when I launched my firm January 1st of this year, um, it's the most aligned and most fulfilled and most satisfying that I've ever been. And
Right.
I graduated from school 23 years ago. I've been a financial planner for 15, 16 years, and now it's coming together. So
Yeah.
I think in our work, what we want to recognize is these things take time.
Mhm.
And just seeing somebody once a year to talk about their investment accounts is not the type of work that I want to do.
Yeah.
Uh, so anyway.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that, and I really appreciate how it takes time sometimes, right? Like, and it's not that you hated aspects of it, it's that you had moments where you're like, "I'm not 100% aligned," right? And then
Hmm.
moving into that full alignment, that full authenticity of who you are and what you want to do in the world and what impact you wanna make in the world.
Hmm.
So, I've shared this with other guests before and on my network, but I have pretty significant body dysmorphia, right? I used to be very, very large. And now I'm much more slender, but I still see a larger person from time to time. I think it aligns with imposter syndrome in the entrepreneur space. We don't know
Hmm.
that we're good enough. Everyone on the outside thinks, oh, you're great. You're doing everything right. On the inside, we're like, I don't know if I'm this person. In the last year or so, I've kind of coined this term. I don't think I've heard it anywhere else, but financial dysmorphia. And what I mean
Hmm.
by that is where someone thinks that they don't have enough because of scarcity mindset, because of how they were raised. But when someone on the outside looks in, they're like, you're in really good shape, you're fine. But there's always that fear of not having enough. So
Hmm.
some people call it money mindset or scarcity mindset. I call it almost financial dysmorphia because you're seeing something completely different than someone else is seeing.
Hmm.
And I say that because I also grew up my money mindset comes from my parents, from my upbringing, and I brought that into my current existence. I
Hmm.
am extremely frugal because as a family growing up, we didn't have much, right?
Hmm.
And I remember my mom sitting down, and I remember the phrase, "Rob Peter to pay Paul." Right? You know
Mhm.
that phrase of we have to figure out which bill we're gonna pay and which one we're not gonna pay and which one we're gonna do this with, and I think so many families can relate to that, especially in the working class kind of society. It's which bills do we pay, which bills do we not pay, and because you're in the middle class, whether it's upper or lower middle class, it's not seen as poverty, it's not seen as
Mhm.
something that's negative, it's just the way it is. But I
Yeah.
remember watching my parents sit down and try to figure out how to pay bills, and I remember getting my first job and feeling like I had to save every penny. I mean, I am that person who I will never in Michigan, we have returnables, deposit on our bottles, right?
Mhm.
I am that person who will never throw away a bottle or a can. If I'm
Mhm.
out somewhere and someone else has one, I'm like, "Don't throw that away. That's 10
Yeah, what are you
cents."
doing? Yeah.
And it's like, "It's 10 cents." I mean, I've gone so far, Jim, as I'll be traveling for work. I travel a lot with work. If I have room in my suitcase, if I drank a soda while I was in, let's say, New Jersey or something, if I have room in my suitcase, I'm gonna put the empty bottle in my suitcase so I can bring it back to
Bring
Michigan
it
and get the
back.
10 cents. I mean, it's that
Yeah.
extreme, and
Yeah.
I still live that way.
I love the term financial dysmorphia. I think it's totally normal for people to have, some, range of being on the spectrum somewhere, right? But I think where it becomes a problem is if it's getting in the way of you accomplishing your goals and moving forward, if it becomes a real roadblock that is holding you back,
Yeah.
right? And there's stress and anxiety related to it, that's where these things really become a problem. But I have so many stories like my dad was a plumber. My mom did like office work in a dental office.
Mhm.
They always had second jobs. So my dad worked in a factory and was part of a union, but he was always doing like jobs on the side. My mother used to clean the office that she worked at because
Mhm.
the doctors didn't want to pay a cleaning company, so they just kind of paid staff under the table to clean up and pick up. And we they used to bring home the soap and shampoo from a hotel.
I
They would
still do
collect.
that.
You still do it?
I
Yeah.
still do that.
Excuse me. Um, yeah, so it's amazing to me. It's still very enlightening for me when I sit down with a client. And over the past number of years, this has become a bigger and bigger part of the work that we do. But when we start to get to know our clients, it's it 9 times out of 10 when we start talking about who their parents were and where they come from, I can make a direct connection into their current behavior based on who their parents were.
Mhm.
In 9 maybe 99% of the time. And it might not happen in the first conversation, but eventually if I work with somebody long enough, you find out that how we're operating today as adults has a lot to do with the experience we had as children
Mhm.
before we were 8 o'clock, right? And this gets there's science backed evidence of this, that these things get burned into our subconscious.
Mhm.
Um, and it's us as children trying to figure out the world,
Right.
right? And how we're supposed to operate in it. Um, but those things can go wrong when we show up in adulthood, and I think it's really powerful to be aware of what those things are and
Mhm.
acknowledge those things and explore who our parents were, where we come from, how they operated with money is a really important step in the process of kind of getting through these things. And then just recognizing that we are our own people,
Mhm.
right, as adults, and we're in completely different circumstances in a lot of cases than our parents were.
Absolutely.
Um, and I can't tell you how many smart, successful people that I work with that um, usual suspect is paying off your mortgage early, right?
Mhm.
If you do the math on paying off your mortgage early, especially if you refinanced your mortgage in the last pre 2022, so before mortgage rates went up because of inflation and the situation we're in today, you could get a historically low mortgage rate. And I still am meeting people that have rates in the twos and threes that are historically low, that are dead set on putting a lot of extra money towards their mortgage and getting it paid off. And 100% of the time, that's because their parents were afraid of debt. But
Mhm.
their parents, what they don't realize is their parents had a mortgage in the 70s and 80s when mortgage rates were 13, and
Mhm.
the economic situation in the country was much different. And they're also, parents were hardworking, blue collar, lower middle class, and now they're at the very top of the middle class, right? Successful professional couples, but they're operating in a different era with a different mindset that they inherited from their parents. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's another thing that I see all the time, and I think some reflection on who your parents were and thinking about your lineage and your experiences as a child. What's your first money memory? Did
Right.
your parents return the bottles? Did they take the shampoo home? Do you remember those things? That's a really great first exercise to start to think about. All right, where do I come from? And is some of this stuff showing up in my adult life? And is it serving me? Or is it really holding me back? And I think what
Yeah.
most people will find is it's holding us back. And one of the exercises that I work with clients, and it's been helpful in my own life as well, is I was almost ashamed. I didn't want to tell my parents that I have a housekeeper. So we have somebody
Mm.
come into the house every other week. We're going down to once a month now that my wife is home. Um, but I was kind of ashamed to talk to my parents about that because I didn't know how they would react to me spending money on somebody cleaning my home, right? And I struggled with that. But when it comes down to it, if you do the math on how many hours it would take us to clean the house, scrub the floors, clean the showers, do like on our hands and knees, like doing that kind of work, um, it's not worth it for me. I'd rather spend that time with my kids
Yeah.
uh, on a Saturday morning than doing the housework, and it's worth the investment, and I can build that into my plan and afford it, and I can
Right.
prove that to myself with the math, right? So
Right.
it's kind of, this is where those two things intersect, where we're aware of how we're operating and how we're feeling about spending this money on delegating household work,
Yeah.
but I can prove it with the math, and that's where the planning and the behavior kind of intersect and
Right.
can kind of do a lot of good.
Yeah. I mean, you bring up so many points. And one thing, when you're talking about like those interpretations from our childhood that they're cemented in our brain, like they're coming in, one of the pieces we talk about is the American Academy of Pediatrics says by the age of 12, all of our first thoughts are there. Right.
Mm,
So our first thoughts are implicit biases. The way we interpret the world is cemented by the age of 12.
hmm
Now, after the age of 12, we can still grow. That's how we shift our and shape our core beliefs, right? Like how we
hmm
want to move forward in the world. So, one of the core beliefs I had to shift was the scarcity mindset. I didn't start shifting that at age 12. I didn't start shifting that until I was probably in my 40s. Now,
hmm
there are still things I do. I still bring bottles back. I still take shampoo and conditioner if I like it from the hotel, right? Like I still do that.
Right.
It doesn't hold me back from doing the other things that I want to do, but the first thing you mentioned was that awareness. It's
Mhm,
the awareness of what your current behaviors are, where they come from, and then deciding if you want to take that forward or if it's
mhm,
holding you back. Is this giving you grace? Is this giving you benefit? Is this serving you? Or is it no longer serving you? And
right,
that's where, as adults, what we do with Us Squared and myself is help people release those first thoughts that are no longer serving them and how we communicate with people, the biases we
mhm,
have about people. For
mhm,
you, I'm hearing it's letting go of those financial mindset, the scarcity mindset that's no longer serving you. Those
mhm,
decisions that we make out of fear instead of out of aspiration.
right,
And I love that because it's all about awareness. It's not about changing who we are. If it's serving you, then let it
right.
serve you.
And it's always going to be a part of you. That's what I've
Mhm.
realized. I mean, again, as a financial planner and somebody who's very passionate about the behavioral and the financial psychology aspects of the work that I do, it still comes up. And it came up recently with my wife's career transition.
Mhm.
Um, I got scared. And even though I could look at the numbers and know that we would be okay during
Mhm.
whatever length of time this looks like. We're going to be fine because the important things are good. It took some work to get me to that point. And
Right.
it wasn't until I was let that go and reassured myself, thought about, this is my old stuff coming up
Yeah.
and we're good. Um, when I aligned myself to those thoughts, that's where my wife just kind of intuitively felt safer. right?
Mhm.
So yeah, that awareness is huge. That
Right.
awareness and acceptance, but it never really goes away. And it's not to say that, you know, um, if you're frugal and you get some satisfaction out of that, then more power to you. But it's, what kind of commitment am I making to this behavior
Right.
and how is it impacting my life?
Right.
Right. So we needed a new dishwasher and it was going to be like $250 to have somebody come install it. So like 250 bucks, I can unhook the hoses and plug the thing back. Like, how hard could this be? Right. Well, we live in an old house. Nothing's ever standard. I did it myself and I got it done, but it took me the better part of like 8 hours when it was all said and done. Um, and now my back hurts, right? So in looking back on that, was that a decision that I made out of that scarcity mindset that presented itself at the counter when I was buying the dishwasher?
Right.
And did that decision really serve me, or did that cost me a day not hanging out with my kids and now dealing with like a heating pad on my back at night trying to stretch out because I spent 8 hours on my hands and knees?
Right.
And then yeah, it never really goes away, I think a lot of those experiences and those mindsets can be reframed as positive. It's just being aware of how where it comes from, what it looks like, and being
Right.
able to kind of reframe and use it for something that's positive.
Yeah. And that's such a good example of some of those conveniences that if you grew up in an environment where you felt like you didn't have the money, that scarcity mindset, whatever it might be, or in my situation, my dad could do anything. Like,
Mm,
I remember thinking as a child, my daddy can fix anything. My daddy can do anything. I remember one of my teachers had something that was broken and I said, "Oh, I can take it home. My daddy can fix anything." Right? Like that was my mindset. So I thought he could do anything. So whenever he gave us suggestions or whenever he said something, I was like, "Oh my gosh, you have to be right because you can do anything." Right?
right. Yeah.
And when it came to installing things or delivering things, my daddy can do anything. So
Hmm.
there was never a need for us to pay someone else to do it because my dad could do it. I mean,
Hmm.
he would lay flooring in the house. He built the deck on their house. Like, and he was a factory worker at Ford. He
Hmm.
wasn't a skilled trade. He didn't build decks, but he can install a toilet. He knows plumbing, he knows electricity.
Yeah.
He really knows a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
So I remember as I got older, I'm like, well, I don't know if I want to pay for someone to come out. I could just ask my dad to come out. And then as
Hmm.
my dad's gotten older, he wants to still be that person to do it all,
Yeah.
but he just physically can't.
Hmm.
And it's hard for him to have to like, when I say, "Oh, I called someone out to help me install or help me hang the TV because it's a huge TV. Because he taught me to
Hmm.
be very handy, I'm pretty handy, but it's a
Hmm.
huge TV, I can't install this, so I called someone out to help me." He's like, "Well, I coulda just come over and help you." It's that
Yeah.
constant reminder, and then it's, "Well, but it's okay to just pay someone to do
Yeah.
some of these things."
Yeah.
And I'm right
Yeah.
there with you. I have a housekeeper come out, and it was hard for me to tell my parents.
Yep.
Um,
And
the
yeah, and
first
it's the
time they came
same.
out, I said, "Well, it's just a one-time thing." Like, I had to almost lie because it was li and then I had to
Just
come
your
back.
line, yeah,
Right!
yeah,
And then I
yeah,
had to come back and
exactly,
say, "Wait, this is my money. I'm allowed to and I deserve this, and it's okay, and I'm
100%.
not taking a meal away from my son to be able to do this."
Yep, yep,
Yeah.
and, yeah, I'm laughing when you're talking about your dad. I think your dad and mine were fairly similar, and, we had a sink drain that was leaking in the basement, and I paid a plumber because there were, like, a couple toilets that I just couldn't get to stop running. I tried myself. It got to the point where I needed to hire a little handyman plumber to come in and do some of these things. And I felt really bad. I didn't tell my dad for a while, and he brought it up. He's like, "Well, I'm coming up in a couple weeks to see you guys and the kids. I'll bring my tools." It's like, "Dad, I took care of it." And he was bummed that he wasn't going to have an opportunity to like do that work. And I think it was more about wanting to be helpful.
Yeah.
And I felt bad that I kind of took that away, but I explained to him too. It's like, I'd rather you come up and spend time with my kids. I
Right.
don't want you to spend that time under my sink, right?
Right.
And I think we all need permission to just allow ourselves to do the things that are going to be most useful and impactful in our lives, right? So
Right.
we can live the life that we want, and that's a lot of the work that I do often is I'm not making recommendations that are wildly different than some people might get elsewhere from another financial advisor, but a lot of times what I think clients need is somebody to reassure them that they're safe
Mhm.
and that they're going to be okay and that they have permission to live the life that they want, right?
Right.
That's okay. They don't need to, kind of square peg into round hole based
Right.
on somebody else's perception of how they should operate.
Yeah. And I think that right there is a great point to kind of finalize the conversation is you can determine what you want out of your life.
Mhm,
And that's what truly allows authenticity to be amplified is when we stop living for what everyone else expects of us. When we stop allowing our lived experiences in our past to dictate how we have to move forward, acknowledge and honor our lived experiences, acknowledge and honor who we are today and why we have become the person we are today, and allow ourselves, gives ourselves permission to dream about what we truly want.
mhm,
And sometimes we've been told that we can't dream, that it's selfish to dream, that it's selfish to do that. But I know as a parent, the best thing I can do for my son is to be happy and to
mhm.
model how to live your life truly aligned and authentic with what I want from this world. And that to me is the number one piece is to give ourselves permission and to not allow our past to dictate our future.
Yeah, I agree, and I think, when I hear you say dreams, what I think of that, maybe supports that is curiosity. I
Mhm.
think now is, probably as good a time as ever in history to be really, really curious about these things.
Yeah.
And what's always interesting to me, I mentioned this book by these Stanford engineer product designers who are talking about designing your life. The first section that of the book is about cultivating curiosity
Mm.
of who we are, where we come from, what's important to us, what are our dreams, what's going to make us happy. Um, I think it's a pretty good time to spend time with those things.
Love that. Jim, thank you so much for this conversation and for reminding us that success doesn't have to be what everyone else wants it to be, that it can be defined by ourselves. For those listening, you can learn more about Jim's work at modernfinancialwellness.com. Connect with him on LinkedIn and Instagram and join his email list for reflections and resources around financial and human well being. Those are all linked in our show notes. Um, Jim, one final question for you. Is there one piece, or if you could give one piece of information, one snippet, one sentence from our conversation today, what do you hope people take away or walk away thinking about from today's conversation?
Oh man, I feel like we had a wide-ranging
We
conversation
did.
that took some turns. That's a tough one. I think if there was one takeaway that I've learned at times the hard way in my own personal journey is this concept that if you're sitting somewhere and it doesn't feel right, it's probably not worth it, right? And I
Mm.
hope that people will gravitate towards the things that make them feel good, make
Yeah.
them feel happy, bring them joy, fulfillment, passion, whatever that is, and away from the things that don't. And I think in the work that I do, the majority of people that I know, I think um, have a lot more capacity to align themselves with a better place and not have to worry about the financial ramifications. So I think if it's one thing, it's just don't if you're sitting there and you don't feel like you're truly being yourself in an authentic place, not in the right place at the right time, you don't have to be there.
Yeah.
You don't have to be there. Give yourself permission to dream and be curious and move on, move forward.
I love that. Thank you so much, Jim. And thank you to everyone
Thank you.
listening. If this episode gave you permission to slow down, listen inward, or maybe move toward happiness or redefine success on your own terms, I hope you carry that with you. I'm Megan Fucciarelli, the Authenticity Amplifier. And until next time, keep choosing alignment, honoring what fits, and amplifying authenticity in your work and your life. Thank you again, Jim.